The train left her at a small coastal station that smelled of rust, salt and rain. Lucia Moretti stepped down, the wind pulling strands of her dark hair across her face. She carried only a suitcase, a box of paints, and an urn wrapped in linen, the last remains of the man she had loved and lost to fire. The village of San Velaro was quiet this time of year. Most shutters were closed. The tourists had long gone. The sea stretched grey and endless beyond the cliffs, its rhythm steady, indifferent. Lucia rented a small stone house at the edge of town, a place that smelled of old wood and solitude. When she opened the windows, the sound of waves filled every corner. Inside, she unpacked in silence. Each movement was deliberate, as if she were afraid to disturb the stillness that had settled around her. The urn she placed on the mantel, next to an unlit candle. She stood there for a long time, watching it, her throat tightening. That night she dreamed of flames again. They were always the same. A wall of orange swallowing everything, the sound of collapsing beams, the last thing she saw of him, his silhouette framed in light before it turned to smoke. She woke up gasping, the sheets clinging to her skin, her body trembling. It took minutes before she realized she was safe. There was no fire, only the sound of the sea. Days passed in a quiet rhythm. She walked the narrow streets, spoke little to anyone. The locals watched her with cautious curiosity. The woman from the city who came alone, who bought canvases and stared too long at the horizon. In the mornings, she tried to paint, but the brush refused to obey her. Every stroke became the same, red, orange, black, flames devouring the canvas. Every attempt ended in frustration. She would throw the brush aside and sit before the sea for hours, her fingers stained with color and ash. The sea fascinated her. It was everything fire wasn't, cool, patient, eternal. Yet as she watched its surface shimmer under the pale sun, she couldn't help but think, the sea burns too, quietly. Sometimes she spoke to the urn, not words of prayer or grief, but the small things she used to share, what she ate, what she saw, what she dreamed. "I'm trying," she whispered once, "but it still hurts." At night, the wind pushed against the windows. The smell of salt mixed with the faintest trace of smoke, or maybe she only imagined it. In the darkness, she would touch the space beside her on the bed, remembering his warmth, his voice saying her name as if it was something sacred. One evening, while walking along the cliffs, she stopped near an abandoned boat resting on the shore below. The tide was coming in, waves licking its hull like tongues of water. Something in the way the light hit it, half broken, half beautiful, made her heart ache. For a moment she thought she saw movement near the rocks, a shadow or a man, half submerged. But when she blinked, there was nothing, only the sea. Lucia stood there until the last light disappeared, her hands trembling. Somewhere deep inside her, something old stirred, a warmth she had buried with him. The fire still slept in her, and tonight it had breathed. The storm came without warning. By dawn, the sea had turned black, swollen and furious, crashing against the rocks with the roar of a wounded beast. Lucia stood at her window, watching the horizon vanish beneath the rain. The world outside was chaos, but she felt strangely calm, almost drawn to it. When lightning split the sky, she saw it again. Something or someone caught in the waves below the cliffs. A figure flung against the surf, disappearing, reappearing, swallowed whole. Her breath caught. For a moment she thought it was another illusion, a ghost born from her loneliness, but then the body rolled closer to shore. Instinct replaced reason. She grabbed her coat, ran barefoot down the narrow path to the beach. The wind lashed at her face, the rain soaking her clothes until she could barely see. The waves pushed the body toward her feet, limp and heavy. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, his skin pale and cut by the cold. His lips were blue. She knelt beside him, trembling. "Hey," her voice broke in the wind. "Can you hear me?" No response. She pressed her ear to his chest. There, faint but steady, a heartbeat. With effort, she pulled him farther from the water. His hair was tangled with seaweed, salt crusted his lashes. He looked foreign, almost unreal, like something the ocean had sculpted and abandoned. When she turned his face toward her, she caught her breath. His eyes were closed, but his features were strong, marked by both suffering and grace. She dragged him all the way to her house, half carrying, half pulling, her muscles screaming in protest. Once inside, she stripped the wet clothes from his body, wrapped him in blankets, and lit the fireplace. The flames hissed and cracked, and the sound filled her chest with an ache she couldn't name. When she touched his skin, cold as stone, she felt that same pull again, that strange connection to something half alive, half lost. Hours passed before he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, grey-green, unfocused. He blinked at her, confusion flickering across his face. "You're safe," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "You were in the sea." He looked around, his gaze darting to the fire, the walls, her. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, almost unused. "San Villaro, my house. You almost drowned." He struggled to sit up, but his body refused. "How long?" "Only a few hours." His eyes found hers again. Something unspoken passed between them. Not gratitude, not yet. Recognition, maybe. The feeling of seeing someone you were never supposed to meet, but somehow always knew. "I'm Adrian," he said finally, his accent soft, foreign. "Lucia." He nodded once, as if sealing something invisible between them. Then his gaze fell to the fire. For a moment, his expression hardened, shadows deepening beneath his eyes. "You should rest," she murmured, sensing the tension in him. "You're safe here." He didn't answer, only stared at the flames, the reflection dancing across his face like ghosts of memory. Lucia sat beside the window while he slept, watching the rain ease into mist. Her body ached, but her mind refused to rest. Who was he? Where had he come from? The sea had taken so much from her. Now, for reasons she didn't yet understand, it had given something back. When dawn finally broke, the house was silent except for the soft rhythm of his breathing. Lucia turned toward him, and for the first time in years the emptiness inside her didn't feel endless. Somewhere between the ashes and the waves, something had begun to shift. The storm passed, but the air stayed heavy, thick with salt and the scent of something unfinished. Adrian stayed. At first, Lucia told herself it was only temporary, until he regained strength. He slept on the couch near the fire, silent, distant. When she left food for him, he only nodded. They lived in the same space like two echoes of different lives, careful not to touch, not to ask too much. She learned small things about him without meaning to. He woke before dawn, disappearing toward the shore, returning with wet boots and the smell of the sea on his clothes. He repaired broken nets and mended old wooden planks she hadn't noticed were cracked. He avoided mirrors, and when he stared at the ocean, there was something in his eyes that resembled grief. One morning, Lucia found him outside, repairing her boat, a vessel she hadn't used since she arrived. He worked in silence, his hands strong, precise. The rhythm of his movements drew her in. "You don't have to do that," she said, approaching. He didn't look up. "I like fixing things that still have a chance." His words caught her off guard. She wanted to answer, but nothing came. Instead, she watched him, the way his muscles moved beneath the damp fabric, the small scar on his neck, the concentration in his jaw. When he finally turned to her, their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. She looked away first. Inside the house, she tried to paint again, but the brush refused her as always. The colors she mixed turned muddy, shapeless. She sighed, threw the brush aside, and when she looked toward the door, Adrian was there, quiet, observing. "I paint," he said softly. "I used to." He stepped closer, glancing at the unfinished canvas. "It's beautiful, even like this." "It's nothing," she muttered. "Just fire." His gaze lingered on her face, then the flames in the hearth. "Fire has many faces," he said. "It destroys, yes, but sometimes it gives life back to what's frozen." The words pierced something deep in her. She turned away, pretending to tidy the table, but her hands shook. That evening, they shared dinner at the small wooden table by the window. The air between them hummed with quiet things, questions, glances, the awareness of proximity. When their fingers brushed while reaching for the same cup, she froze. He didn't pull away immediately. The contact was brief, but the warmth lingered long after. Later that night, Lucia couldn't sleep. The sound of the sea pressed against the windows like a heartbeat. She wandered into the living room, finding him still awake, sitting by the fire, the glow painting his skin in soft amber. He looked up when she entered. Couldn't sleep either. She shook her head. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty this time. It was alive, stretching between them like a current. She sat across from him, knees drawn close. The fire cracked, shadows danced. He studied her face, the curve of her lips, the sadness in her eyes. "You look like someone who's waiting for something," he said. "Maybe I am." "What are you waiting for?" Lucia hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "For the fire to stop." Adrian's gaze softened, but he didn't move closer. He didn't have to. The distance between them had already begun to burn. Outside, the wind had gone still. Inside, the silence shimmered, fragile, trembling, alive. Two ghosts, bound by loss, learning how to breathe again under the same roof. The storm returned the next night. Wind pressed against the windows like desperate hands, and the sea howled beneath the cliffs. Lucia lay awake, watching shadows twist across the ceiling, the sound of rain drumming against her chest. Downstairs she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. Adrian. He was restless too. Something in her wanted to call his name, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. The air felt charged, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Then came the crash, a sudden burst of thunder that shook the house. Lucia startled upright, her pulse racing. Memories flooded in. Heat, screams, the smell of smoke. She clutched the sheets, trembling. Before she knew it, he was there. Adrian stood in the doorway, rain-soaked from going outside, his shirt clinging to his skin. His eyes searched hers, reading the fear before she could hide it. "You're shaking," he said quietly. "I saw it again," she whispered. "The fire. Every time the thunder hits, I see it." He stepped closer, cautious. "It's gone now. It's never gone." Her voice cracked, breaking into a sob. Adrian hesitated, then reached out, slowly, as though touching something sacred, and took her trembling hands. She didn't pull away. His touch was warm, despite the cold. A spark moved between them, fragile and alive. "Breathe," he murmured. His eyes were steady, grounding. She did. The world narrowed to the space between them, the rhythm of their breathing, the rain, the faint hum of the sea. Without thinking, she stepped closer. Their foreheads met, her tears brushing his skin. He drew a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not sure for what. For crying, for wanting, for everything she couldn't fix. "You don't have to be." The distance dissolved. Their lips met, softly at first, then deeper, a trembling release years in the making. The kiss tasted of salt and rain and something like forgiveness. She felt herself fall into him, into warmth and need and silence. When he lifted her face, his hands framed her gently, reverently. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough. But she didn't. The moment unfolded like a tide breaking free, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Every movement carried both pain and tenderness, as if they were trying to rewrite the language of loss through touch. Her breath mingled with his. The room glowed in the light of the fire. For Lucia, it wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering what it meant to be alive. For Adrian, it was penance and rebirth, the first time he had allowed himself to feel since the sea had taken everything from him. The rhythm of the rain softened. The fire crackled lower. Afterward, they lay in silence, the world outside fading into nothing. His fingers traced invisible lines along her skin. Her hand rested over his heart, counting its steady beat. Neither spoke. Words would have broken the fragile peace they had found. Lucia closed her eyes. For the first time in years, the fire inside her didn't burn. It glowed, calm and deep, like embers sheltered from the wind. Adrian's breath brushed her ear. "The storm's ending," he murmured. "No," she whispered back. "It's only beginning." And in the darkness, they both knew, something in them had shifted beyond return. Outside, the sea calmed, the waves moving with slow surrender. Inside, the flames whispered against the quiet, not to destroy this time, but to keep them warm. Morning came quietly. The storm had passed, leaving the air washed and bright, the scent of wet earth mixing with salt. Lucia woke to the faint hum of waves and the warmth of sunlight on her face. Adrian was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, buttoning his shirt. His hair was damp, his expression unreadable, not cold but careful, as if he were afraid that one wrong word might break the fragile peace they'd found. "Did I wake you?" he asked softly. "No." Her voice was low, still heavy with sleep. "You were going to leave without saying anything." He turned, meeting her eyes. "I wasn't sure if you'd want me to stay." "I do." The words slipped out before she could stop them. He froze, something flickering in his gaze. Surprise, maybe relief, maybe fear. Then he nodded slowly. "Then I'll stay." The hours that followed unfolded like a quiet truce. They shared breakfast by the window, coffee and fruit, the world outside soft and golden. When she laughed at something he said, something small, unimportant, it startled them both. Her laughter sounded unfamiliar, like sunlight breaking through clouds that had hung too long. He smiled, a real one this time. "You should do that more often." "What?" "Laugh. It suits you." She looked down, embarrassed, tracing circles on her cup. "I'd forgotten how." "You're remembering." Later, he helped her fix the shutters that the storm had nearly torn loose. Their hands brushed again, lightly, intentionally this time. The touch carried none of the urgency of the night before. It was quieter, deeper. As the day warmed, Lucia set up her easel on the porch. For the first time since she'd arrived, she wanted to paint. The sea shimmered under the sunlight, shifting between blue and silver. She dipped the brush, hesitated, then began. Adrian watched from a distance, repairing the boat that had become his refuge. He worked with steady hands, glancing at her now and then, as if drawing strength from her focus. By afternoon, the painting began to take shape. Not flames this time, but water. Not destruction, but reflection. When she showed him later, shy and uncertain, he studied it in silence. "It's beautiful," he said finally. "The sea looks alive." "It feels alive," she whispered. "For the first time, it doesn't scare me." Something softened between them again, the kind of quiet understanding that didn't need to be spoken. They moved together easily now. Shared meals, long walks, gentle touches that spoke louder than words. But beneath the calm, a shadow lingered. It came in small moments, the way Adrian's eyes darkened when she asked about his past, the way he looked out at the horizon as though expecting something to return. Once she woke in the night to find him standing by the window, staring into the darkness where the sea met the sky. "Can't sleep," she whispered. He didn't turn. "Some nights the ocean remembers more than I do." Lucia watched him, her heart tightening with a feeling she couldn't name. Part love, part dread. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the silence between them felt too fragile to break. Instead, she stepped forward and touched his arm. He turned then, his expression softening, and she kissed him. Slow, deliberate, without words. The sea sighed outside, gentle and endless. In that moment, Lucia let herself believe in peace, in beginnings. She didn't yet see that the sea had only given her calm to prepare her for the truth still hidden beneath its waves. And the calm didn't last. It never does. For days, the world seemed still, too still. Lucia painted, Adrian worked, and the house filled with the gentle rhythm of ordinary life. But something unspoken pulsed beneath it all, like a heartbeat beneath a wound. It began with a name. Lucia was sorting through old sketches when she found a newspaper folded inside one of her notebooks, a relic from the city she had tried to forget. The paper was brittle, yellowed by time. She almost threw it away before she saw the date, the night of the fire. Her chest tightened. She unfolded it. The headline blurred under her trembling fingers. Fuel vessel explosion claims 6 lives off the coast. Dozens injured. She froze. Beneath the headline was a list of names, crew members, engineers, divers. Her eyes skimmed the list, heart pounding, until one name pulled the air from her lungs. Adrian Keller. The letters burned on the page. At first, she thought it couldn't be him. The name, the sea, coincidences, nothing more. But then came the photograph, grainy but unmistakable, a younger version of the man sleeping in her bed, standing beside the twisted remains of a ship, soot covering his face, eyes hollow. Lucia's vision blurred. She read the article again and again until the words began to twist. The explosion had set off a chain reaction, the blaze that had reached the city outskirts, the inferno that consumed the warehouse where her husband had been trapped. Adrian, the ship, the fire, everything circled back. When the door creaked open behind her, she turned sharply. Adrian stood there, holding a basket of tools, salt still on his skin. The look on her face told him everything before she said a word. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice low. Her throat burned. "Tell me it's not you." He didn't answer. "Tell me." Adrian stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair, eyes filled with something between guilt and sorrow. "It was an accident," he said finally, "a miscalculation. The fuel line failed. The entire vessel went up before we could stop it." "The fire spread," Lucia whispered. "It reached the city. It killed him." He closed his eyes. "I know." Her knees almost gave out. She stumbled back, shaking her head. "You knew? All this time?" "I didn't know it was him, Lucia. I swear. Not until I saw your face. Not until I realized the date. I wanted to tell you, but you didn't." He took a step forward, and she flinched away as if his touch might burn her. "Lucia, please, no." The word ripped from her throat. "You shouldn't be here. You should have died with them." The silence after those words was unbearable. Rain began to fall outside, soft at first, then harder as if the sea itself grieved for them. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You think I haven't died every day since that night?" His voice cracked. "You think I don't see their faces every time I close my eyes? I came here because I couldn't live with it. I didn't want to hurt you. She turned away, covering her ears, her sobs raw and broken. "Get out." "Lucia, get out." He hesitated, the storm raging around them once more. then left without another word. When the door shut, she collapsed onto the floor, the newspaper still crumpled in her fist. Outside, thunder rolled over the sea, echoing through the house like the sound of something breaking beyond repair. For the first time since she met him, Lucia wished the sea had kept what it tried to return. The days that followed blurred together, stripped of color and sound. Lucia stopped painting. The brushes dried where she'd left them, the canvas abandoned half-finished, the air inside the house heavy with silence. Every corner seemed to echo his absence. The forgotten cup on the table, the faint trace of salt in the sheets. Outside, the sea kept moving, but it sounded different now. Hollow, mechanical. To her, it wasn't water anymore. It was a grave. At night, she lay awake listening for footsteps that would never come. Sometimes she thought she heard the door creak, or the floorboards sigh under weight that wasn't there. Each time, her heart lifted and fell again when the silence returned. It had been 3 days since Adrian left. The villagers said they saw him walking toward the docks, his bag slung over his shoulder, the wind carrying the scent of a storm. Lucia didn't ask where he was going. She told herself she didn't care. But her hands betrayed her. They kept reaching for the place he had stood, for the warmth he had left behind. The guilt was a weight she couldn't carry and couldn't set down. She hated him for what he'd done. She hated herself for needing him still. By the 5th day, she couldn't bear the house anymore. She walked down to the cliffs barefoot, the cold biting at her skin. The sea below was restless, its surface bruised and grey. She stared at it for a long time, her thoughts drifting between the waves and the memory of flames. Fire had taken her husband. Water had taken her peace. Now there was nothing left to take except her. When the first drop of rain hit her cheek, she didn't move. The sky opened above her, the storm swallowing the horizon. And then, a voice. "Lucia!" She turned. A fisherman she recognized from the harbor was running toward her, shouting over the wind. "You shouldn't be here!" he yelled. "They say the foreigner's gone out again, out to the wreck." Her stomach clenched. "What?" "The diver, Adrian. He took the small boat, said he had to finish something before it's too late. The waves are turning bad." The rest of his words disappeared under the crash of thunder. Lucia's breath caught. For a heartbeat she couldn't move, then her body did what her mind couldn't. She ran, down the path, through the rain, her feet slipping on the slick stones. The wind tore at her hair as the beach came into view, empty except for the dark outline of a single boat fighting against the waves. Her voice broke as she screamed his name. "Adrian!" No answer. The sea swallowed the sound. The rain stung her eyes. She could barely see. The boat was small, fragile against the fury of the water. She watched it tilt, disappear, reappear, a flicker of white against the grey. "Adrian!" she cried again, her voice raw. "Please!" But the sea didn't care. Lightning split the horizon. For an instant she saw him, a figure standing at the bow, staring into the deep as if he were ready to surrender to it. Then the wave came. It hit the boat like a fist. When the darkness returned, the boat was gone. Lucia sank to her knees in the sand, her tears lost to the rain. The sea roared relentless, merciless. She whispered into the storm, "Then take me too." But the sea stayed silent, as if even it had grown tired of taking. That night, San Velaro slept under the sound of thunder, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Lucia didn't light the fire, because the sea, to her, was dead. The storm raged through the night. By morning, the world was unrecognizable. Grey light over a wounded sea, the beach littered with driftwood and silence. Lucia hadn't slept. She sat by the window, watching the rain fade into mist, the sky trembling with exhaustion. Her eyes were raw, her body numb. Somewhere out there under the waves he was gone. She wanted to feel anger, but all that remained was emptiness, the kind that echoed when she breathed. When the knock came at her door, she didn't move at first. Then she heard the fisherman's voice. "Signora, they found someone." Her heart stuttered. Who? The foreigner, the one from the wreck. Lucia's legs moved before her mind caught up. She threw on her coat, ran through the drizzle down to the harbor. The air stung with salt. A small crowd had gathered near the pier, voices murmuring, faces pale. They had laid him on a makeshift stretcher, soaked, bruised, barely breathing. For a moment, she couldn't see his face through the tangle of wet hair. Then his hand twitched. The world tilted. "Adrian." She fell to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his cheek. His skin was cold, but alive. His lips moved. A breath, a whisper. "Didn't mean to." "Don't speak," she said, her voice breaking. "Please." They took him to her house. It was the closest, the warmest, the only place that had ever held them both. She tended to him in silence, washing the salt from his wounds, wrapping him in blankets, lighting the fire she had sworn she'd never light again. The flames glowed softly, gold against his pale skin. For the first time in days, warmth returned to the room. He drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering fragments. "The wreck, the names, the one I couldn't save." Lucia hushed him, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. "You came back," she murmured. "Why?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused but searching for her. "Couldn't let it end like that. You should have stayed away." He smiled faintly, weak but sincere. The sea tried. Tears filled her eyes. She hated him. She loved him. Both truths coexisted like fire and tide. Impossible. Inseparable. She sat beside him for hours, listening to his breathing, tracing the lines of his hand with her thumb. Every scar told a story. Stories of water, loss, survival. Stories she now shared. When the fever broke that night, he woke to find her asleep beside the bed, her hand still resting in his. "Lucia," he whispered. She stirred, blinking through the dim light. "You're awake. I didn't want to hurt you." "I know." He looked at her, really looked, as if memorizing the way her hair framed her face, the faint glimmer of tears she didn't bother to hide. "Then why are you here?" "Because I can't hate you anymore," she said simply. "I've tried." Something fragile shifted in the air like the tide changing direction. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was soft, uncertain. Not desire this time, but something quieter, deeper, forgiveness. Lucia leaned closer, resting her forehead against his. "We're both ghosts," she whispered. "Maybe this time we learn to live." Outside, the sea murmured against the shore, calmer now, almost tender. The house filled with the scent of salt and smoke, of endings and beginnings intertwined. The ashes, it seemed, had not drowned. They had only settled, beneath the water, waiting to be found again. The next morning came pale and still. A thin fog floated above the sea, dissolving in the first light like breath on glass. Inside the house, the smell of salt and smoke lingered, the last traces of the storm. Adrian sat near the window, wrapped in one of her blankets, watching the horizon with a quiet that didn't belong to despair anymore. Lucia brewed coffee, her movements slow, almost reverent. Neither spoke much. Every sound, the kettle, the gulls, the whisper of waves, felt sacred. When she placed a cup in his hands, he met her eyes. "You stayed," he said. "I told you," she replied, her voice calm. "The sea doesn't decide for me." A small smile tugged at his lips. He looked down, tracing the rim of the cup with his thumb. "I've been thinking. When I was under the water, I thought I'd see nothing, just dark, but it wasn't dark. It was light, all around. I saw him, the man who died that night, the one you lost. Lucia froze. Her heart stumbled. I think, he went on, he wanted me to come back. Maybe not for me, but for you. She shook her head. Don't say that. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then took it gently. He would have wanted you to live. Tears rose before she could stop them. She turned away, gripping his fingers tighter instead of letting go. They spent the day together without plans, fixing the porch steps, hanging the laundry, walking along the beach where the tide kissed the sand. The air was cool, tasting of endings. Every moment felt like borrowed time. At sunset, the light turned copper. The sea burned in gold and crimson, reflecting the sky. Adrian stopped walking and faced her. I have to go, he said quietly. Lucia felt the words like a wave breaking inside her. Where? I don't know. Somewhere I can stop being what I was. I can't stay here, Lucia. Not after what I did. She wanted to beg him to stay, but something deeper, something gentler, kept her still. If you leave, I won't follow, she said, but I'll wait. He stepped closer. For how long? As long as the sea remembers us. Their lips met, soft and trembling. It wasn't the desperate hunger of that first night, but something slower, more deliberate, a kiss that carried everything they couldn't say. His hands framed her face, and when he pulled her close, she felt his heartbeat against hers, steady and fragile. They made love one last time, beneath the fading light. There was no urgency now, no guilt, only gratitude, the quiet ache of two souls who had burned and still dared to reach for warmth. The air smelled of salt and skin, of forgiveness. After, they lay tangled in silence. The sun disappeared beyond the water, and night bled into the sky. Adrian pressed a kiss to her shoulder. I thought I'd lost everything to the sea, he murmured. But I found you. Lucia turned to him, eyes shining in the dim light. Then let it take what it wants. It can't have this. They fell asleep like that, his hand on her heart, her breath against his chest. When she woke, he was gone. The bed was still warm, the door left open, the sea calm and endless. Lucia stepped outside, her nightgown fluttering in the dawn breeze. On the sand near the water's edge lay his compass, the same one she'd seen on his wrist when they met. She picked it up, pressed it to her chest and whispered, "Between fire and salt, we begin again." The horizon glowed gold, and the sea answered softly as if it understood. Months passed before Lucia realized how quietly the world had changed. San Villaro woke each morning the same way it always had, the fishermen shouting from the docks, the church bell ringing somewhere in the distance, the smell of salt and bread drifting through the narrow streets. Yet to her, everything felt new, like a painting she'd never truly seen until now. The house on the hill was still hers. The shutters no longer creaked when the wind blew. Adrian had fixed them. Sometimes she still expected to hear his steps on the stairs, his quiet hum as he worked on the boat. The silence he left behind was gentle now, not cruel. She painted every day. The first canvas after he left had frightened her. It was all color, no fire, no grief, only the sea, alive and endless. The waves danced in shades of silver and indigo, and somewhere in the horizon she painted a figure, small, faceless, standing where the sky touched the water. She didn't need to name him. Her exhibition opened in the spring, in a small gallery near the coast. The villagers came, curious and proud. Tourists stopped to stare at her work, their murmurs soft, reverent. Someone asked what her paintings meant, what inspired her. Lucia smiled faintly. "The sea taught me how to breathe again," she said. When the last guest left, she stood before her favorite piece, the largest one, the one she hadn't shown anyone before. It depicted the storm, wild and luminous, a woman of fire standing against the waves, her hair and the water tangled together. Behind her, a man's shadow dissolved into light. She traced the edge of the frame with her fingers, whispering, "You're free now." Outside, the air was warm. The sea hummed low against the rocks, calm and familiar. Lucia walked down to the beach, barefoot, her dress brushing the water. The tide reached for her like an old friend. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze lift her hair, tasting salt on her lips. She remembered his voice. The sea tried, and she answered the memory quietly. It couldn't. A small wooden box rested in her hands, the compass he'd left behind, its brass surface dulled by time. She opened it once more, watching the needle tremble, forever pointing toward the horizon. She knelt and placed it in the sand, just where the waves could reach. The next swell rolled in, gentle and sure, covering it completely before pulling back. When the water receded, the compass was gone. Lucia smiled. Not sadness, not loss, just peace. The fire inside her no longer burned. It glowed, steady and warm. It had learned to live beside the sea. As dusk fell, she walked home through the fading light, her steps slow and certain. The sound of the waves followed her all the way up the hill, blending with the hum of the wind through the olive trees. When she reached the house, she paused at the door and looked back. The sea shimmered under the moon, endless and alive. "Good night, Adrian," she whispered. The wind carried her words away, scattering them like ashes across the water. Inside, she lit a single candle, not for mourning, but for memory. The flame flickered once, then steadied, bright against the quiet. Outside, the sea took the fire, and neither was ever alone again.